The young alien aide dropped the stack of papers in my lap and walked away without a single word. She did not look at me. She did not say please. She did not say thank you. She just dropped them and kept walking, her long silver robes brushing the polished floor of the council hall. I sat very still for a moment. My name is Elena Brooks. I am the human ambassador to the Galactic Council. I have served in this position for 11 long years, and in that moment I knew that I was finished, not tired, not angry. Finished. The aide had thought I was a cleaner. She had thought I was a junior worker. After everything we had done for them, after all the years we had given them, she had looked at me, a senior human ambassador, in full diplomatic dress, and decided I was someone who filed papers for her. I picked up the stack. I read the top page. It was a list of trade routes that needed updating, the kind of paperwork given to a first-year clerk. I closed my eyes for a moment and made my decision. Right there on that cold marble bench, in the heart of a council that did not know what it was about to lose. I stood up. I walked to my private office. I locked the door and I sent a message to Earth Command. The message was very short. It only had 2 words. Begin quietus. That was the code. That was the moment. The plan had been ready for 60 years. Sleeping in dark rooms on Earth, waiting for a signal. Now the signal was sent. You have to understand something about my people. We are patient. We are very patient. Some say too patient. We came to the Galactic Council 80 years ago, full of hope. We were the youngest species at the table. We bowed our heads. We listened. We learned. We did not push. We did not boast. We worked. And work we did. When the Great Plague came to the Illyrian people and killed almost 2/3 of them, it was human doctors who came. The council sent paperwork. We sent ships. We sent medicine. We sent our own scientists who stayed in the hot zones for years, breathing the same air as the dying, trying to find a cure. Some of our doctors did not come home. We found the cure and we gave it away for free, not for money, not for power, just because it was the right thing to do. When the Drevani crops began to die from a strange fungus, our farmers came. Our botanists worked in their fields for 40 years. We built them new seeds. We saved their food supply. We asked for nothing in return. When the Vorn expanse, that strange and twisted region of space, became impossible to cross, it was our pilots who learned to fly through it. Only human minds, for some reason no one fully understood, could handle the strange pull of that region without becoming sick. We piloted their ships. We carried their cargo. We kept their trade alive. When the relay grid in Sector 9 fell apart, our engineers built a new one. From the ground up, it hummed quietly across hundreds of worlds, carrying messages, news, and trade orders. We maintained it. We fixed it. We kept it alive. And what did the council give us in return? Insults, small ones at first. Joke here, a dismissive nod there, then bigger ones. They took our colony, Kepler 9, and gave it to another species, calling it a small administrative change. They placed unfair taxes on our goods. They gave the credit for our work to others. The plague cure became known as the council cure. The new seeds became the Drevani hybrid. The relay grid was simply called council technology. Our names were rubbed out of the history books page by page, year by year, and we said nothing. We kept working. We kept hoping that one day they would notice. That one day they would say thank you. That one day they would treat us as equals. That day never came. The worst of them was Counselor Thrax. He was tall with gray skin and eyes the color of cold metal. He had been on the council for nearly 100 years, and he hated us. He hated us because we were new. He hated us because we worked harder than his people. He hated us because we did not bow low enough. 3 months before the day the aide dropped the papers in my lap, Thrax had stood up in a closed meeting and called us, and I will never forget the words. The apes who learned to count. Room had laughed, not all of them, but enough to make me sit there with my hands folded in my lap and my face perfectly calm while my heart felt like ice. I did not respond. I had been trained not to respond. I had been an ambassador for a long time, and I knew that one bad reaction could undo decades of careful work, so I smiled, I nodded. I went back to my office and I wrote a careful report to Earth. Earth wrote back the next day. The reply was very short. It said only this: hold steady, the plan is almost ready. I did not know what the plan was. I only knew it had a name: quietus, a word, a soft word, the kind of word you whisper to a child who is going to sleep. Now sitting in my office with the door locked, I knew the plan was simple, so simple it almost made me laugh. We were going to leave. Not with anger, not with shouting, not with any kind of fight. We were just going to pack up and go home. Every human in council space, every doctor, every pilot, every farmer, every engineer, every translator, every scientist, every clerk, every cook, every child, all of us quietly, without a word. For the next 11 days, I sat in the council hall and smiled at every insult. I signed every unfair trade paper they put in front of me. I bowed when they told me to bow. I listened when Thrax made his speeches. I clapped politely. When others clapped, I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them sure that nothing was changing. Meanwhile, every 6 hours, another human ship slipped quietly out of council space. The departure logs read routine maintenance. The ships were full, every seat, every cargo hold full of our people and our things. Our doctors finished their last shifts at council hospitals and walked away without saying goodbye. Our pilots flew their last runs through the foreign expanse and did not return. Our engineers handed in their tools at the end of their shifts and quietly boarded ships home. Our farmers harvested their last crops on Dravani fields and left the seeds in neat boxes at the edge of the fields. They did not need to take the seeds. The seeds were not the secret. The knowledge was the secret, and the knowledge was leaving with them. In our office buildings on the council home world, our staff packed up files and sent them to Earth. Our schools quietly closed, our markets shut their doors, our embassies emptied room by room, and the council noticed nothing at all. They were busy with their own affairs. They were busy with their parties and their speeches and their tiny little fights over tiny little laws. They did not see us leaving. We had been there so long, so quietly, doing so much work in the background, that we had become invisible to them. They had stopped seeing us years ago. On the morning of the 12th day, I dressed carefully. I wore my full ambassador robes. I pinned my Earth medal to my chest. I brushed my hair. I drank 1 cup of coffee, slow and hot, and I felt my hands shake just a little. Not from fear, from something else, from the strange feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff that you have been walking toward for years. I walked into the council hall. The morning session had already started. Thrax was at the front making one of his long speeches. He was talking about how the trade balance favored some species too much and how this was unfair to others. He was, of course, talking about us. I walked to my seat and sat down. I waited. I did not interrupt. I let him finish his speech in full. When he was done, the other counselors clapped. Politely, he sat down with a small smile on his cold face. I stood up. The room went quiet. They were not used to me speaking unless I was called on. I walked slowly, calmly to the central platform. I placed my badge of office on the stone table. I placed my key card next to it. I removed the medal from my chest and laid it down too. Then I spoke. My voice was clear and steady. I had practiced these words for many nights. I said, the Sol Confederation withdraws from the Galactic Council. All human personnel, all human ships, all human cargo, all human services are recalled. We thank you for the years of partnership. We wish you well in your future work. That was all. I did not shout. I did not accuse. I did not threaten. I simply turned around and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard the sound of confused voices. Someone laughed. I think it was Thrax. He thought it was a joke. He thought I was making some kind of dramatic gesture and that I would be back tomorrow with a list of demands. He thought, I am sure, that this was the start of a negotiation, that we wanted something, that we were finally going to push back, and that he could push back harder and that everything would settle down. He did not understand. None of them did. We did not want anything. We were not negotiating. We were just leaving. I walked out of the council hall for the last time. The great doors closed behind me with a soft sound like a sigh. My ship was waiting on the landing pad. The pilot, a young woman named Clara, gave me a small nod as I climbed aboard. She did not say anything. She knew what this day meant. The ship lifted into the air. The council home world fell away below us. All silver towers and glittering domes. I watched it shrink in the window until it was just a small bright point in the darkness. Then I turned away from the window. I sat down. I closed my eyes. The plan was complete. Every human was now off council ground. Every ship was now in transit home. Every embassy was empty. Every office was dark. For the first time in 80 years, the Galactic Council had no humans in it at all. They did not know yet. The morning session was probably still going on. Thrax was probably still laughing. But they would know soon, and when they did, they would not understand. They would look around and try to find someone to shout at, someone to threaten, someone to push back against. They would find no one. We would be gone. And the silence we left behind would be louder than any speech I could ever have made. I leaned back in my seat. I let out a long, slow breath, the first one in 11 years that did not feel heavy. We were going home. And the council, though they did not know it yet, was about to learn what it meant to live without us. The fuse had been lit. It was a long fuse. It would burn for years, and by the time it reached its end, the Council, as it had existed for 200 years, would be a thing of the past. But that part of the story was just beginning. The first sign that something was wrong came 9 days after I left the council hall. By then, I was already back on Earth, sitting in a small office in Geneva, watching reports come in from across the galaxy. The reports were sent through quiet channels gathered by listeners who picked up council broadcasts and forwarded them to us. We did not have spies exactly, we just had ears that had been left in place long after the bodies had gone home. The first report was a small one. Medical transport had vanished in the Illyrian sector. It was carrying 2,000 colonists from one world to another, and it had simply stopped sending signals. No call for help, no wreckage, nothing. The ship had been due to cross a corner of the Vuorn expanse, and the crew had been told that local pilots could handle it. They could not. The ship had drifted into the strange currents of the expanse, and without a human pilot to feel the right way through, the ship had gone in circles for 6 days until the air ran out. When the news reached the council, there was no sorrow at first, only confusion. Why had the human pilot not been on board? Why had no one assigned one? The council called for the duty rosters and read them, and that was when the first cold feelings started to grow in their stomachs. There were no human pilots anywhere. Not on the rosters, not in the lounges, not in the training schools. The pilot housing on the Vuorn station was dark and empty. The lockers were cleaned out. ID badges had been returned in neat piles at the front desk with a small handwritten note that simply said, "Thank you for the years." A counselor named Vesh stood up in an emergency meeting and demanded to know where the human pilots had gone. Her voice was sharp and full of disbelief. Thrax, sitting at the head of the table, tried to wave the question away. He said the humans were probably on a long break. He said they would return soon. He said the council should not panic over what was clearly a small matter. 5 days later, the relay grid in Sector 9 went dark. It did not break down all at once. It went dark slowly in patches like a fire dying. First, the outer relay stopped transmitting, then the middle band, then the central nodes. Within 14 hours, 300 worlds lost contact with each other. Trade orders could not be sent. Medical alerts could not be received. News bulletins fell silent. The council called in their best engineers who were not human. The engineers studied the grid for 2 days and then came back with a report that no one wanted to read. The report said the grid was working as designed. Nothing was broken but the calibration routines, the small daily adjustments that kept the signal strong, had not been done. Those routines were not in any manual. They had been done by hand every day by human engineers who had carried the knowledge in their heads. The engineers said they could probably learn the routines given time. The council asked how much time. The engineer said 5 years, perhaps 10. The room went very quiet. Then came the food, the Dravani fields, which had fed 19 worlds for 40 years, began to fail in the spring planting. The seeds were still there, the fields were still there, but the seeds had to be matched to the soil year by trained hands. The matching was done by human botanists who had spent decades learning the small secrets of each world, each field, each season. Without them, the seeds were planted in the wrong patterns. The fungus came back, the very fungus that humans had once chased away, and it ate the young plants before they could grow. By midsummer, 18 worlds had no harvest. By autumn, the grain stores in the cities were running low. By winter, the first reports came in of empty markets and worried families. The Dravani council member, a tall and proud being named Aylin, stood up in a session and demanded help. She wanted the council to send aid ships at once. She wanted emergency rations from the central stores. She said, action. The council voted to send the ships. Ships were loaded, the ships were ready. But there were no pilots to fly them through the long routes that crossed the Vorleg expanse. The food sat on the docks for 6 weeks, slowly going bad while the council argued about what to do. In the end, the food was sent the long way around through safer space. It took 4 months to arrive instead of 3 weeks. By then, many of the worlds had already begun rationing. The pharmaceutical industry was the next to break. The Dravani had built their medicine factories on the assumption that certain raw materials, certain special chemicals would always be available from human suppliers. Those chemicals were not exotic, they were not rare, they were just made by human factories, sold at fair prices, delivered on time, every time for 60 years. The Dravani had never bothered to learn how to make them. When the human factories closed, the supply ended. The Dravani had stockpiles that lasted 4 months. After that, the pharmacy shelves on 3 dozen worlds began to empty. Common medicines became rare. Rare medicines became impossible to find. Hospitals started rationing. Doctors started sending patients home with paper notes that said, "We have nothing for you." By the 60th day after my departure, 3 council member species were dealing with food shortages. By the 90th day, 2 more had problems with their power grids, which depended on parts that humans have been quietly making for decades. By the 100th day, the Vorn expanse was a closed border. Trade routes that crossed it were dead. Third of all council trade had simply stopped. And through all of this, Earth said nothing. We did not gloat, we did not send messages, we did not boast on the public channels, we did not give interviews. The council kept waiting for some kind of statement from us, some demand, some price they could pay to make us come back. The statement never came. We simply sat in our homes on our worlds and went about our lives. I want to tell you about a man named Henry Ward. He was an engineer who had spent 30 years working on the relay grid in Sector 9. When the call came to go home, he packed up his small apartment in the worker district, said quiet goodbyes to a few non-human friends, and boarded the ship home with the rest. When the grid began to fail, he was sitting in his garden in a small town in England planting tomatoes. A reporter found him. The reporter asked him if he was worried about the grid going down. Henry shrugged and said, "That is not my job anymore." Then he went back to his tomatoes. That story spread through council space like a strong wind. They could not understand it. They could not understand a man who had built something for 30 years and then walked away without looking back. To them this was strange. To us it was simple. We had been treated as workers, not partners. So we had stopped working. Inside the council, the panic began to grow. Thrax tried to keep order. He gave long speeches about how the species of the council were strong, how they did not need humans, how everything would settle down in time, but fewer and Fewer counselors believed him. They could see the empty markets, they could see the cold pharmacies, they could see the dark relay nodes. A young counselor from a small species, the Illyrians, stood up one day in the General Assembly. Her name was Sasha. Her people were the ones the humans had saved from the Great Plague. She had lost her mother and her 2 sisters too. That plague when she was a child, she remembered, she had always remembered. She walked to the central platform, she did not bring notes, she spoke from her heart. She said, listen to me, we are not facing a crisis because the humans left. We are facing a crisis because we never learned what they were doing. For 80 years they kept us alive in 100 quiet ways, and we did not see it. We did not want to see it. We told ourselves we did not need them. We laughed at them. We pushed them down, and now they are gone, and we are looking around at all the things they were holding up, and we are surprised that things are falling. The room was silent. Saskia went on. She said, this is not the humans' fault. They asked for nothing. They worked for us. They saved us, and we in return called them apes and took their colonies and erased their names from the records. They left because we made them want to leave. Now we have to find a way to live without them. But first we have to admit here in this room what we did. She sat down. The room was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the lights. Thrax tried to speak. He tried to call her speech disrespectful. He tried to remind the counselors of their dignity. But his voice sounded weak, and several counselors looked away from him. The mood had shifted. Something had cracked. That night a vote was held in private. It was not a public vote. It was a small one between the leaders of 22 member species. The vote was to open a formal investigation into the council itself, to examine the records, to find out what had happened, to decide if the council in its current form was fit to continue. The vote passed, 11 against 22. Favor. The investigation was called the Tribunal. It would last 73 days. It would change everything. But before it began, Saskia sent a message to Earth. She sent it through the old quiet channel that I had left open just in case anyone wanted to talk. The message was simple. She wanted humans to come and testify. She wanted us to tell our side. She wanted us to come back, even just for a little while, to help the council find its way to the truth. The message reached me in Geneva. I read it twice, then I sent it to Earth Command, and I waited. The reply came back within the hour. It was short as always. The reply was for me to send to Saskia. It said this: we are not interested in being your witnesses. We have already left. Accounting is yours to do. I read those words and felt a strange mix of feelings, pride, yes, sorrow. Also, I knew Saskia. I had met her once, years ago when she was a young aide. She was a good person. She had a good heart. And we were leaving her to do this hard work alone. But I also knew why. If we came back, even just to testify, we would become part of the story again. We would become something the council could blame or appeal to or use. Our absence was the most powerful thing we had. To break the silence now, after we had carried it so far, would be to lose everything we had earned by walking away. So I sent the message to Saskia. I added one line of my own. It said, you do not need us to find the truth. The truth is already there in your records. Look for it. We trust you. She wrote back 2 words, "Thank you." That was all the contact I had with anyone in council space for many months. The tribunal began 3 weeks later. It was held in the great chamber, the same hall, where I had stood and made my final speech. The seats were full. Every member species sent a representative. The Illyrian sent Saskia, who was made the chief questioner. The Dravani sent Aelin, who had grown thinner over the months. The Vethic sent a quiet older being named Myrak, who was known to be fair and careful. Thrax was not on the panel. He was a witness now. He sat in a small chair to the side, looking smaller than he had ever looked before. The first day, Saskia opened the tribunal with a single question to the entire council. She said, "What did the humans do for us, and how did we treat them in return?" That question, simple as it was, would take 73 days to answer in full. And the answers, when they came, would be the end of the old council forever. Mjark of the Vethic was the one who built the long list. I did not know him then. I only learned of him later when his name began to come up in the broadcasts that reached Earth. He was an older being, gray of skin and slow of speech. He had been a clerk for most of his life, working in the dusty rooms of the council records office, sorting old papers. He had seen 40 years of meetings come and go. He had filed reports that nobody read. He was, in the eyes of most counselors, a small figure, a man of paper. That was why Saskia chose him. She knew that what the tribunal needed was not a fiery speaker. It needed a quiet man with a long memory and a clean pair of eyes. Mjark was that man. For the first 3 weeks of the tribunal, Mjark did not speak much. He sat at the side table with a stack of papers and a small writing pad. He listened. He took notes. He asked every now and then for a record to be brought from the archive. The clerks would bring the records and he would read them, and he would underline things in soft blue ink, and he would set them aside. By the start of the 4th week, his stack of underlined records was very tall. It was time for him to speak. He stood up slowly, leaning on the table for support. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He simply began to read. He read out the dates of 47 separate moments in council history when human work had been done and the credit had gone to someone else. He read each one out in full with the date, the place, and the name of the human or humans involved. 47 moments, 47 thefts of credit, 47 names erased from the record, sometimes carefully, sometimes carelessly, but always erased. The Dravani hybrid seeds, he said, were developed by a team of 7 human botanists led by a woman named Margaret Hill. Hill spent 21 years on the Dravani worlds. She is not named in any council record. The seeds are credited to the Dravani Agricultural Office. The Illyrian plague cure, he said, was developed by a team of 3 human doctors and 1 Illyrian medical student. The lead human doctor, Peter Dawson, lost 2 members of his own family to the plague during the research when he had to bring them with him to keep working. He is not named in any official record. The cure is called the Council Cure. The Vorn Expanse pilot manual, he said, was written entirely by a human pilot named Catherine Lowell, who flew the Expanse for 34 years. Her name was removed from the 2nd edition. The manual is now credited to the Council Pilot Service. The Sector 9 relay grid, he said, was designed by a human engineer named Henry Ward, who later worked on it for decades. The grid is officially called the Council Communications Network. Ward is not named anywhere in the official documents. He read on and on and on. The room sat in silence as Myrick named name after name, year after year, project after project. By the end of his reading, the air in the great chamber felt heavy, as if a weight had been lowered into it. When he finished, he set down his papers. He looked around the room. He said only this: we did not just lose the humans, we chose to lose them. Slowly, carefully, page by page, we took their hands and refused to remember them. They have not punished us, they have only stopped saving us. He sat down. There was no clapping, no reaction, just silence, the kind of silence that comes after a building has fallen, when the dust is still in the air and no one yet knows what to say. That night the broadcast went out across the council worlds. People watched in their homes, families gathered in front of their screens. Children asked their parents, who is Margaret Hill? Who is Peter Dawson? Why have I never heard these names before? The parents did not know what to say. Myrick became something he had never been. In his long life, he became a hero. People sent him letters. People came to the gates of the records office to thank him. He was confused by it all. He told one reporter, "I did not do anything. I only read what was already there. The truth was in the papers all along. Anyone could have read it. They simply chose not to." The trial moved into a new phase. Now, Saska began to call witnesses, real witnesses, beings who had worked alongside humans, who had seen them at close range, who had stories to tell. A Dravani farmer named Carroll came to speak. He was old and bent, and his hands shook. He said, "I worked next to a human named John Becker for 20 years. He came every spring. He stayed through the harvest. He taught me how to read the soil, the wind, the small signs in the leaves. When my son was sick, John gave him human medicine and saved his life. When my wife died, John came to her ceremony and stood with my family. He never asked for anything. When the call came for the humans to leave, he came to my house and gave me a small box of seeds and said, 'These are the new ones. Plant them in the eastern field. The soil there is right for them.' Then he shook my hand and went away. I have not heard from him since. Do not know where he is. I do not even know which country on earth he is from. He was my friend for 20 years and I never asked." Carroll stopped speaking. His shoulders shook. He could not go on. Saska thanked him quietly, and the next witness was called. An Illyrian doctor named Pell spoke next. She had worked alongside Peter Dawson during the plague. She said he never slept. He worked until his hands shook. He saved my whole village. When my daughter was born, he held her in his arms and laughed. He said she had the strongest little fingers he had ever felt. When my mother died of the plague, he sat by her bed for 3 nights. Even though he could have gone home, he was not a hero in any book. He was just a doctor doing his job. But the job was saving us, and he did it. And we let his name be erased. She paused, then she said, "I want to find him. I want to write to him, but I do not even know if he is still alive. I never asked him for his home address. None of us did. We just took what he gave us and we let him go." The witnesses came one after another. Pilots, farmers, factory workers, teachers, nurses, builders, each one had a human friend, each one had a story. Each one had taken the human for granted. And now, in the empty space where the human had been, the shape of the friendship was visible for the first time. Thrax took the stand on the 41st deck. He came in slowly. He had aged in the month since the tribunal began. His gray skin had a yellowish tint. His eyes were tired. He sat in the witness chair and looked out at the room, and the room looked back at him in silence. Saska asked him, "Why did you call the humans the apes who learned to count?" Thrax tried to deflect. He said it had been a joke taken out of context, said in a private meeting many years ago. Saska did not let him deflect. She had the records of that meeting. She read out the full quote. The room had laughed. The record said many counselors had laughed. Thrax had no answer. He looked down at his hands. Saska asked, "Why did you vote to remove the human colony at Kepler 9 and give it to another species?" Thrax said it had been a small administrative matter. Saska read out the colony records. 200,000 humans had lived on that colony. They had built it from nothing over 30 years. They had been moved off it in 6 months with no compensation, no explanation, and no thanks. Saska asked, "Did you ever in your career propose any motion to thank the humans for any of their work?" Thrax was silent for a long time. Then he said, "No, I did not." Saska asked, "Did you ever in your career vote in favor of any motion to thank them?" Thrax was silent again. Then he said, "I do not remember." Saska said, "The records show that you voted against 3 such motions, and you abstained from 7 others. There is no record of you ever voting in favor of any motion of thanks toward the humans. Is this correct?" Thrax said, "Yes, it is correct." The room was very quiet. Then Saska asked her last question. She asked it gently, without anger. She said, "Why?" Thrax looked up. His eyes were wet. For the first time in his long, hard life, the cold metal in them had become something softer. He said, "I do not know." He said, "I told myself they were below us. I told myself they were lucky to be at our table. I told myself they were eager to please because they needed us. I told myself this for so long that I forgot to ask if it was true." He said, "I thought they would always be there. I thought they liked it. I thought they were happy with the small place we had given them. I never asked. I never looked at them as people who could leave. I looked at them as workers who could not." He said, "I was wrong about all of it. I was wrong." He sat in the chair with his hands in his lap, and he looked smaller than any being I had ever seen. Saska did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you for your honesty. You may step down." Thrax stood up. He walked out of the great chamber. He did not return to it. The verdict came on the 73rd day. The panel of judges, 12 in number, drawn from 12 different species, read out their findings. Mjark was one of them. So was Saska. So was Elin of the Drevani. The findings were this: the council was found grossly negligent. 47 specific instances of erased contributions were entered into the official record. The culture of the council was found to be deeply flawed, with a long history of contempt toward human members. Thrax and 8 other senior counselors were stripped of their positions. They would not serve on any council again. 3 member species announced that they would withdraw from the council. Entirely. 4 more demanded a complete restructuring of how the council operated. The old council, the panel declared, was finished. A new body would have to be built in its place with new rules, new members, and a new way of thinking. The verdict was sent to earth through the same quiet channel I had left open. I read it in my small office in Geneva. The trees outside my window were turning gold. It was autumn. I sat at my desk. For a long time after I finished reading, I thought about Margaret Hill, and Peter Dawson, and Catherine Lowe, and Henry Ward, and John Becker, and all the others. I thought about how their names had been written down again at last. After all these years, I thought about what it must be like on the Giovanni Worlds for an old farmer named Carroll to finally say his friend's name in public to a room full of listeners. I did not write back. There was nothing more for me to say. I closed the file, I stood up, I walked outside, and I went home. 7 years passed. I lived quietly. I bought a small house near a lake in Switzerland with a low wooden roof and a garden full of stones. My granddaughter Lily came to visit on weekends. She was 8 years old when I retired, and she grew up running through the long grass behind my house, chasing the ducks at the water's edge. I did not give interviews. I did not write a book. I did not return to space. The new council, when it was finally formed 3 years after the tribunal, sent me 17 invitations to come and speak. I declined them all politely, always politely. The new council was a different thing from the old one. It had a smaller membership. Many species had chosen not to rejoin, including, of course, all the human worlds. The new council met on a different planet in a smaller building with simpler furniture. The long silver towers of the old home world had been left mostly empty. The great halls were closed up. The old chambers were turned into museums. Mjark was on the new council for a few years before he retired. So was Sasko, who served as its first president. Alan became the head of its agricultural board. They did good work by all accounts. They listened to small species. They kept records honest. They did not erase names. But they did not have us. They never would again. We had built something else by then. Not an empire, not a federation, not really. Just a network, 7 loose groupings of human worlds scattered across 3 sectors, connected by trade and friendship and shared memory. Each group ran itself. Each group had its own customs, its own leaders, its own small disagreements. We did not try to unite them under one flag. We had had enough of large councils. Sometimes other species came to us. Small ones, quiet ones, species that had been at the edges of the old council and that had learned watching what we did, that there was another way to live. They asked if they could trade with us. We said yes. We made fair deals. We did not boast. Some of them asked if they could join one of our groupings. We said no gently. We were not building an empire. We were just building a life. They could trade. They could visit. They could even live with us if they wanted to, but we would not lead them. We would not be their hands and their feet, not anymore. A few of them understood. A few of them did not. The ones who did not went away, looking confused. The ones who did stayed, and over the years they became friends. I was sitting in my garden one afternoon when Lily came out with a book in her hand. She was 15 by then, tall and serious. She had her grandfather's brown eyes and her mother's soft voice. She sat down on the bench next to me and showed me the book. It was a school history book, pictures of stars and ships and councils. She pointed to a page. She said, "Grandma, my history teacher said today that you were the one who walked out of the old council. He said you started everything. Is that true?" I looked at the page. There was a small picture of me there, taken on the day I had walked out of the great chamber. I looked younger. My hair was darker. My face was very serious. I was holding the bag with my badge inside it. I said, "No, I did not start everything. I just took the last step. The walking had been going on for a long time before I took that step. Many people had been walking very quietly for many years. I just opened the door at the end." She said, "But the teacher said you were brave." I thought about that for a moment. I said I was tired mostly. There is a kind of tiredness that looks like courage from the outside, but it was not really courage. It was just the end of patience. When patience ends, the next step is to leave. That is what I did. Anyone in my place would have done the same. She said, "But you knew what would happen. You knew the council would fall." I shook my head. I said, "No, I did not know that. I only knew that we could not stay." The fall of the council was not something we planned. We did not push it. We did not want it. We just stopped holding it up. It fell because it was already falling, and we were the only ones holding it together. When we stepped away, the falling that had always been there became visible. She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "Was it sad to leave?" I said, "Yes, it was. I had friends there. I had places I loved. I left them all behind, and I did not return. There were things I missed for years. Smell of the bread in the small bakery near my office, the sound of the morning bells in the city, the way the light fell on the silver towers at sunset. I still miss those things sometimes when I'm very still." She said, "Then why did you leave?" I said, "Because the price of staying had become too high, not in money, in something deeper. We were giving them everything, and they were giving us nothing in return except small insults. A friendship can carry many small insults if there is also kindness underneath, but when the kindness goes, only the insults are left, and you find yourself spending all your strength carrying nothing, so you put the bag down." That is all I did. I put the bag down. She nodded slowly. She said, "Did you ever want to go back, even just to visit?" I said I thought about it once or twice, but I never went. Going back would have meant becoming part of their story again. We were never going to do that. We made our own story now. She looked at the lake. The water was very still. A duck swam slowly across the surface, leaving a small line behind it. She said, "Do you think they understand now, the other species? Do you think they know what they did?" I said, "Some of them, yes. The ones who lived through the bad years, the ones who saw the empty markets and the cold pharmacies, they understand. The next ones, the children and grandchildren, they only know it from books. To them, it is history. They will not feel it the way Carol felt it, or Pell. For them it is just a story." She said, "That is sad." I said, "That is how it always is. Each generation has to learn its own lessons. We cannot pass them on whole. We can only leave the books behind and hope that the children who read them will understand a little and try not to make the same mistakes." We sat in silence for a while. Afternoon light moved across the lake. Boat passed in the distance. Lily said, "Grandma, do humans have any enemies now?" I thought about that. I said, "No, not really. We have neighbors, some of them like us, some of them do not. None of them want to fight us. We do not want to fight anyone either. We are not very interesting to fight. We do not have much that anyone wants to take. Our worlds are pleasant, but they are not rich in the way some other worlds are. We are quiet. People mostly leave us alone." She said, "Is that how you wanted it to be?" I said, "Yes, that is exactly how I wanted it to be. After all those years of being needed, of being used, of being important to other people's plans, the best thing in the world is to be small and quiet and uninteresting, to live in a house by a lake, to have a granddaughter who asks me good questions, to watch the ducks." She smiled at me. She said, "I love you, Grandma." I said, "I love you too." She put her head on my shoulder for a moment, the way she used to when she was small. Then she got up and went back into the house, taking the book with her. I sat alone in the garden for a long time after that. I thought about the old council, about the long marble halls, about Thrax sitting in the witness chair with his hands in his lap saying, "I do not know. I do not know." I thought about the aide who had dropped the papers in my lap on that morning so many years ago. I had never learned her name. I wondered sometimes what had happened to her. Had she lived through the bad years? Had she watched the markets empty and the relays go dark? Had she ever in all that time thought about the older human woman in the ambassador robes who had been sitting on that bench? Had she ever realized who I was? Had she ever felt sorry? I would never know, and it did not matter. She had been a small piece of a much bigger thing. The bigger thing was a whole council that had decided slowly over decades that we were beneath their notice. She was just one face of that decision. I did not blame her particularly. I did not blame Thrax particularly either. They had built a culture, all of them together, in which my people were less than people. The culture had made them. They had made the culture. It was a circle, and it had ended only when we stepped out of the circle. A breeze came across the lake. The water rippled. The duck flew away. I remember once, many years ago, when I was a young diplomat just starting out, an older mentor of mine had said something to me that I had not understood at the time. She had said, "The strongest move in any negotiation is the one no one expects." Most people, when they are angry, shout louder. They push harder. They make demands. The thing they never expect, the thing that breaks them, is silence, real silence. Not a pause before more talking. Complete final silence. The kind of silence that says, "We are not here anymore." I had not understood her then. I had thought it was just a clever phrase, but I understood it now. We had given the council the strongest move there was. We had given them silence, not anger, not a fight, not even a goodbye letter, just a slow, quiet leaving, and then nothing at all. They had waited for us to come back. They had waited for years, and we had not come back. We had just gone home. That silence had said more than any speech I could have given. It had said, "We are not your tools." It had said, "We do not need your approval." It had said, "We will live our lives without you, and we will live them well, and you will have to find a way to live yours without us." That message in the end was the only One that mattered. The sun was getting low, the lake was turning pink and gold. I stood up, slowly leaning on my stick, and I walked back toward the house. Lily was at the kitchen window, waving at me. The smell of soup came out through the open door. I waved back. I did not look at the sky. I did not need to. The stars were still up there. They would be there tomorrow. They would be there long after I was gone, and long after Lily was gone, and long after the new council in its own time eventually fell as well, the way all councils do. What mattered was not the stars, it was the lake, the garden, the granddaughter at the window, the soup on the stove. We had not left the council to win, we had left to live. And we were living now here quietly on our own terms, in our own homes, in our own time. That was the whole story. That was the only story that had ever mattered. I went inside. I closed the door behind me. The kitchen was warm. Lily was setting the table. The bowls clinked softly against the wood. Outside, somewhere very far away, a great old council still sat in its smaller new halls, doing its careful work, trying to be better than the one that had come before. We wished them well, truly, we did. We just were not coming back. And we never would.